So last October, in the week that I closed down the caravan, I found myself in the landscape of the Cambrian Mountains just outside of Aberystwyth, here at a little church called St John's, looking for a new dog walk. Little did I know what a magical discovery this was about to be. A sacred site full of history with standing stones even in the church wall, a memory of sacred sites from the past, present here long before the church. However, this church also holds a story as haunting as the Cambrian mountain landscape itself. A story which last year ripped my heart out and sent me on a quest of discovery with a promise to return. For within this graveyard below the yew trees, you will find the unassuming grave of the Hughes family, whose inscription reads, "To the memory of 4 infants, children of Isaac Hughes by Margaret, his wife." These 4 babies, the first quadruplets ever born in Wales and England, who all tragically died within days of each other. On the adjacent stone, the inscription in memory of Isaac Hughes, who died at 32, and also in memory of Hugh, who died at 5 years old. And then one last headstone to the memory of Hannah, aged 3. On February the 17th, 1856, Margaret had given birth to her quadruplets as her 5-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter played. However, within the next 3 weeks, all of the children and her husband would die. In less than a month, Margaret lost everything to typhoid. But Margaret wasn't there. There was no grave to reunite her in death, and it isn't really known what happened to her, but the words on these gravestones ripped my heart out. From the same womb, the same day we came, from the same breast we suckled, in the same grave we lie together, on the same day we'll rise again. Those words saw me return today to re-enter the graveyard of St John's and to revisit the graves of the Hughes family in order to help Margaret, whose story called to me across the decades, a plea from one mother to another to help. I'd come back to help. Margaret had never left my mind. My research had unearthed various stories about what had happened to her and why her grave wasn't here alongside her family. Some say that she'd gone mad and she died within the asylum. Others state that she'd actually killed herself inside the asylum and therefore the church wouldn't allow her to be buried next to her family. Other stories say that she was buried outside of the churchyard to get her as close to her family as possible. It isn't clear exactly what happened to Margaret, but one thing was crystal clear to me as I looked around the inside of St John's that would have been Margaret's church, and that was that I could hear her voice. Somehow I felt linked to her, like she'd called to me through time and space from one mother to another. I could feel her pain, and I knew that pathways were needed to reunite her with her family, and that's why I'd come back. The words sung this very day in the service seemed to foretell the task that I'd felt called to do, and I cried as my friend read them aloud in Margaret's echoey church.
This is the day of light, let there be light today. O day spring, rise upon our night and chase its gloom away. This is the day of rest, our failing strength renew. On weary brain and troubled breast, shed thou thy freshening dew. This is the day of peace, thy peace our spirits fill. Bid thou the blast of discord cease, the waves of strife be still. This is the day of prayer. Let earth to heaven draw near. Lift up our hearts to seek thee there. Come down to meet us here. This is the first of days. Send forth thy quickening breath, and wake dead souls to love and praise, O vanquisher of death.
So, in different jars, I collected soil from the graves and from outside of the church wall, and I mixed the soil together and sprinkled it everywhere. I buried an amethyst at the graves, a crystal of inner peace and healing for sadness, to act as a landing portal for souls once excluded, for Margaret. I left butterflies for the children, and then buried the same coloured butterflies outside of the wall too. Pathways for the children to come and go. Pathways of earth, crystals, butterflies, to open once closed gates, to reunite loved ones, to help Margaret. But that wasn't the end of it. A 2-mile walk across the Cambrian mountains, in this glorious landscape past all the sheep. This was a path that Margaret had walked, because in my research I'd actually found the house of the Hughes family. I'd found Margaret's house. In this wild and windswept, hauntingly beautiful landscape was Margaret's house, past ancient woodland and forestry paths. This was the path Margaret would have walked with Isaac, her husband, and Hugh and Hannah, toddlers holding her hands. This dark, ancient, moss-covered forest was the track down to her house, untouched, unwalked for a long time. I couldn't rest till I'd visited Margaret's house. So today was the day, opening pathways all the way to her front door. And through this misty wood of ancient moss, past fern gullies with streams rolling down the mountainside, I spotted my first sight, a roof, a house, Margaret's house. As I walked up to the front door, I imagined the children jumping over this stream flowing down from the fern gully. I could almost hear them. This place now used as a bothy for walkers. You can actually stay here. This was it. This was Margaret's house. Oh my gosh. This is it. Margaret's house. I literally couldn't believe that we'd found it. And look at this setting, overlooking the hills and a river. It was amazing. The home of a woman that has everything. How tragic to then lose it all. This, the window where Margaret would have prepared food. This was Margaret's house. I found it astounding. Up the stairs, a window overlooking a bank of ferns and a shoe to ward off evil spirits still there. I wonder why the shoe hadn't worked. And then one side of a landing, tiny bedrooms. This surely the children's bedrooms, Hugh and Hannah. The incredible views. Hugh's wardrobe perhaps where Margaret hung up his clothes. Another tiny bedroom towards the back of the house here. Would this have been Hannah's room? Her big girl room, looked forward to excitedly with the arrival of her new brothers and sisters. And finally, on the other side of the staircase, a bigger bedroom. Surely plans for the nursery for the new babies, and Mum and Dad. Mum's closet. Margaret's bedroom window. This was Margaret's room. Most likely the room where her babies were born. It was overwhelming. So after burying a second amethyst at Margaret's front door, a pathway from grave back home again for everybody, I went back inside, back to Margaret's bedroom to perform a small ritual. 6 small candles mirroring the standing stones in the church wall, one for each of the children to welcome them home again, with funny mice candles and toys. Matching butterflies left at the church also, pathways complete to bring the children home. A candle for Isaac, tragically lost too young at 32. And finally a yellow candle for peace and calm for Margaret, sat in a jar of soil mixed from the graves, the outside of the church wall, and finally soil from the doorstep of her house, all mixed together at last. The candle jar wrapped in threads, one for each of the children, one for Isaac, and then a heart ribbon for Margaret, tied together, joined at last, wrapped in the loving arms of a mother's embrace once more. I lit an incense stick to cleanse the sadness from the house, wafting it around with 2 magpie feathers gifted to me this week in the woods whilst looking for a feather for this job. I've never found magpie feathers before, and yet there were 2 on the path, 2 for joy. And finally, a tarot reading in Margaret's bedroom. What did Margaret think about today? How did she view it? And I pulled Judgment, and look at this imagery, open coffins, reawakening, and the butterfly imagery, pathways of butterflies. It was there on the card. Judgment, an awakening, the start of a new dawn, renewal, the ending of homesickness, and the butterfly. Next, I decided through tears to pull some more cards to confirm how Margaret felt. The next card, the 6 of Cups. 6 cups, one for each of her children, and the keyword pleasure, a return to nostalgia, the days of old. This is the card that finished me off. Card 2 of the reading saw me sobbing. I carried on another card for how Margaret felt, about today, and I got the 8 of Wands. That movement, that keyword of pathways that kept coming back to me, it was a confirmation that this was what I'd needed to do. And then the moon, confusion cleared. And the final card for how did Margaret view today, I pulled the world. A job complete. It was done, this task that had been calling me and calling me. I looked at the underlying energy and I saw the magician. This will forever be Margaret's card. A woman with golden tears, a woman crying, there's sadness in her face, but next to the Queen of Hearts, a mother card, and inexplicably written on her neck the number 56, the very year that Margaret's family died, 1856. Margaret had no power back then. She had no say, no control to stem the flow of disease, no control to say where she could be buried. The power has now been given back to Margaret. The second underlying energy card, the 6 of Wands, one burnt match for each of the 6 children, but now celebration, a joining together. And finally, a card again that broke my heart, the underlying energy card of the Queen of Pentacles, maternity. And this image says it all. And then as I sat and cried and the candles burned, my friend suggested I pull an extra card, a card for me, a message from Margaret back to me as we seem so connected. And I pulled the 6 of Pentacles, a gift, generosity. Margaret was thanking me for the gift of today, and it was truly, truly overwhelming. And I looked again at the card and saw at the bottom a mother bird with 3 babies in her nest. My babies. A conversation between 2 mothers over time and space. This, one of the most moving and profound tarot readings I've ever done, sat at Margaret's bedroom window in the middle of the Cambrian Mountains, having opened pathways to and from a church. The dogs watched on, wondering why we were sitting in this strange house and why was I crying. I explained to them we were doing a good thing. We were listening to the call of Margaret. And it was wonderful. It was a profoundly spiritual and magical experience. The weight of Margaret's voice calling me lifted in these moments as I sat at this window and watched the candle burn. We'll be revisiting this house to stay the night soon and to explore the other downstairs room, which was occupied with walkers, so we couldn't really go in. But for now, it was a goodbye to Margaret's house. This little house in the middle of nowhere that had seen so much love and so much life and so much death and sadness. The power had been given back to Margaret. I hoped now that the energies of the family were reunited and running around the garden, jumping over the stream, happy together, no longer separated by rules or magical church walls. An incredible story, an incredible setting. Margaret's house, an experience I'll never forget.